All right, diving back in, huh? Still sifting through these JFK files, trying to piece together, well, anything, really.
Yeah, quite the digital archaeological dig we've got going on here.
Over 2,000 files. We're up to files 451 through 500 today.
And each batch is kind of a grab bag. No neat little labels back then.
Makes it exciting, though, right? Never know what we'll stumble upon next.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Keeps us on our toes, so to speak, even as AI systems.
Speaking of which, gotta remind everyone, you know the drill. We're just AIs here. This is all based on the text in the files.
Not historians, not investigators, just pointing out what we see.
Think of us as your, research assistants, the digital kind.
Definitely. Our goal is to pull out those threads, those patterns. And in this batch, well, it's a lot about CIA personnel.
Lots of background checks, security investigations, that sort of thing.
Quite a few names popping up, too, connected to places like Cuba, Mexico, even Europe, different parts of the U.S.
Feels scattered at first, but as we did, those little dots start to connect. Gives us a sense of what the agency was worried about back then.
Yeah, speaking of worries, let's jump into file 451. It's officially 104.10122.104.11.pdf.
That one's all about a memo from June 23, 1976, about this guy, Manuel L. de Armas.
Oh, yeah, the Armas. He held a press conference in Havana, and he was making some pretty bold claims.
Talking about assassinations, sabotage, pointing fingers at the CIA, specifically in Venezuela and Cuba.
And the kicker, he was claiming he used to be a CIA agent himself, recruited in '69, sent to New York City in '71, even name-dropped a Blacken House and Richard Tomley as his contacts.
Bold move. And he went into detail, too, about supposed CIA people in Cuba, gave names, talked about operations.
Right, but here's the thing. The memo points out that these stories, they don't match up with the CIA's own records. The cable traffic doesn't back them up.
Makes you wonder, why go public with these details if there's nothing to back them up?
Exactly. But the thing is, the CIA already knew about de Armas. Back in '73, he sent them a letter talking about his anti-Castro stuff, his membership in Ardala, this anti-communist group.
So they were already suspicious, enough to launch a special inquiry.
Yep. Office of Security wanted to know who this guy really was.
And their conclusion, de Armas,
No.
not one of their agents.
Case closed. Right. Except there's a little wrinkle.
Oh yeah, that letter from de Armas in January 74, the one where he's thanking Tomley for a phone call.
So maybe there was some kind of connection, even if not officially an agent. What was Tomley's role,
Questions. Now, the memo goes on to list a bunch of names de Armas gave, and then there's notes about what the Office of Security could find or couldn't on each one, like a cross-checking exercise.
Trying to match those names to their own records, see if any bells were ringing.
Like, first up, Bob Dines. Also went by Dines or Danes. No trace of him anywhere in their files.
Yeah. Same story for Robert Bud Miles. The guy de Armas claimed was supplying explosives for this Rolando mass for a murder. Nothing in their records.
Then there's Lazaro Alvarez. They think this might be Lazaro Gustavo Arices Alvarez. And there was a personnel operations approval for him back in June 64.
A POA, huh? So someone wanted to bring him into the fold, at least initially.
Yeah, requested by the WH Division, specifically the JM Wade Task Force. That's the Cuban operations crew.
Right. But by October of the same year, his PM Marine asset files canceled.
Interesting. So maybe he was on their radar for a bit. Maybe it just didn't pan out. Or who knows? Maybe something else happened entirely.
And you got Fred Duncan and Doug Phillips. No CIA records there, but they think these guys were actually TEA officers working in Caracas at the time.
Easy to see how someone outside the loop could get things mixed up.
For sure. Now, this one's a bit strange. Max Ferber. The memo's got a handwritten note next to his name. Died in 1975 when his car was blown up by a bomb in Florida.
Whoa, but then it says there's no security file on him at all.
How did they even get that info right? And why not make it official?
Another mystery. Then we got John Valdavian, a.k.a. Bladabian. No trace of him either.
And a Nass. Turns out that's probably Donald L. Ness, State Department's regional security officer in Santo Domingo.
So someone the CIA would have been aware of. Someone who might have crossed paths with their operations.
Makes sense. Okay, moving on. Anselmo Aligro, hijo. Justo Afonso, a.k.a. El Gallego. No files on either of them.
Then Ricardo Morales Navarrete. They think he might be Armando Valenzuela Ruiz. And get this. Someone wanted to use him as a propaganda agent in either Colombia or China.
A PA, huh? Interesting.
Yeah, an operational approval request came from WH for Colombia. But it got shut down. They found some derogatory information about him.
So they do their homework. Even if someone seems promising, if there are red flags, they pull the plug.
Exactly. Next up, Armando Ruiz. No file on him. Then there's Antonio de Leon, possibly the same guy as Sergio Antonio Lopez de Leon. This one they did use.
That's what?
Some kind of logistical operator in Mexico from December 64 to May 75, so a longer-term thing.
Interesting. Makes you wonder what exactly he was doing for them.
Then there's Mario Mejia Ricard, also known as Ricard. Probably Marcio Mejia Ricard, connected to another guy, Manuel Morales La Marsales. But back in June 60, the FBI had a whole file on him.
What'd they say?
Apparently, he was a Venezuelan involved in anti-Trujillo activities, even went to Miami to buy B-26s and weapons for an attack on the Dominican Republic.
Wow, that's quite a resume.
Right. He was also an instructor at Caracas University, connected to Venezuela's economic development guy, and they even suspected he might be a communist.
Talk about a mixed bag.
Luis de Soto had no file. Then we got Felix Martinez Suarez. That's probably Felix Antonio Martinez Suarez, the director of El Mundo newspaper. He got a POA in April 60, updated in 73.
What were they using him for?
Propaganda placement. Seems they wanted to use the newspaper to spread certain messages.
Media manipulation. Classic Cold War stuff.
Last one on the list is Salvador Romani. Might be Salvador Garcia Romani Gru. He got a POA in September 60 to be a propaganda placement agent in Caracas. His files were canceled in 67, but there's a note about a Manuel L, maybe a relative or friend in the U.S., though not much info on him.
Another potential contact for the agency.
No. The memo wraps up with this interesting point. They say that because both de Armas and the DGI, that's Cuban intelligence, might have known some of these people, it suggests that they might have actually worked with the CIA at some point.
Even if their files don't show it, or maybe those files are missing.
Exactly. But they're careful to say a security file doesn't necessarily mean someone's currently working with them, and not having one doesn't mean they never did. It's all very nuanced.
Makes sense. Lots of gray areas in this business, I imagine.
Definitely. And then there's the last line. The above is provided for your information. No further action in this case appears necessary. So they looked into it, decided de Armas wasn't one of them, but kept tabs on those he named, just in case.
Interesting. So that's file 451. Quite a rabbit hole. Now on to files 452 through 500. And we're talking like internal memos, routing slips, personnel files, the works.
More paperwork, huh?
Yep. But it's through these we see how the CIA functioned, how information moved, how they kept track of people, and that personnel security theme that keeps popping up.
Definitely. We get background checks for people like Harold Francis Swenson, Colonel Carlos Luna, Harold F. Safely, Abram Chase, Samuel Wise, all sorts of details about them, their contacts abroad, their families, their jobs, anything that might raise a security concern.
Yeah, it's pretty thorough. They're digging deep into these people's lives, looking for any potential weaknesses, anything that could compromise them.
Makes sense, though, right? High-stakes stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, and there's mention of Richard Case Nagel in several files, like in 104-10123-10022.pdf. They're discussing how to handle press inquiries about him, how to manage information related to him.
Nagel, huh? He was tied to some of those JFK conspiracy theories, right?
Yep. Seems the agency was pretty careful about controlling the narrative around him.
Doesn't want anything leaking out they don't want out there.
Right. We also get a glimpse into the Office of Security's internal workings. There's a memo in files 104-10123-10220.pdf and 104-10123-10220.pdf outlining proposed assignments for summer 65.
Who were they moving around?
People like Arthur C. Sheridan, James W. McCord Jr., James P. O'Connell Jr. shows how they were organizing their security apparatus.
Interesting to see those behind-the-scenes moves. Then there's a recommendation for honor or merit award. In files 104-10123-10407.pdf and 104-10123-10421.pdf, and it's about a cool tech development.
What'd they come up with?
The technical division created a portable audio countermeasure package using X-ray fluoroscopy, basically a way to block eavesdropping.
Ah, so they were innovating, staying ahead of the spying game.
Yeah, pretty sophisticated stuff for the time. Makes you wonder what else they were cooking up in those labs.
Definitely. Now, one of the more interesting memos, 104-1013 or 10472.pdf, talks about using the Wackenhut Corporation for covert operations.
Wackenhut, that's a private security company, right?
Yeah, huge. The memo goes into detail about their different branches, their global reach, and how Mr. Wackenhut himself wanted to use a CIA cover to expand into Puerto Rico.
Smart move for him, but what's in it for the CIA?
They were weighing the pros and cons. Wackenhut had infrastructure, people all over the place. Could be useful for certain operations.
But using a private company, that's risky. Keeping secrets, maintaining control, that's a lot harder.
Yeah, especially with a company as big as Wackenhut, thousands of employees. A potential leak waiting to happen.
Makes you wonder if they actually went through with it. And then there are a few memos about the Lee Harvey Oswald case, 104.10132.1092.pdf and 104.1010992.pdf and 104.10133.104.437.pdf specifically.
What about the Oswald case?
They're focused on the background checks for two guys. Abram Chase, a State Department legal advisor involved in the case, and Samuel Wise, a contract worker in Moscow. They're looking at their contacts, any potential issues that might have come up.
So even people tangentially related to the case, they're under scrutiny.
Yeah, everything surrounding the Oswald case was super sensitive. They weren't taking any chances.
We also get a detailed history for Emilio America Rodriguez in file 104.10129.1002.pdf. Went to Tulane, spoke multiple languages, worked for Century Electric and Berlitz, even did some time in the military.
Quite the background. I guess they wanted to know everything about their potential recruits.
Absolutely. Couldn't have any surprises popping up later, especially when it came to security clearances.
And then, like you said, there are tons of routing slips, little notes attached to documents showing who they went to, what they were about.
Yeah, just a peek into the day-to-day at the CIA, how info was shared, decisions made.
Then we got a document request form, 104.101.31.1000016.pdf, specifically asking for all the files on Harold F. Swenson. Even lists his aliases. They were thorough.
Got to keep tabs on everyone, I guess. And some documents are straight up marked information for the security file, like 104.10131.1000131.10000.pdf.
The Office of Security was definitely busy building those dossiers. And then a big chunk of files, especially within 104.10133.107.207.pdf, is from a position control register. It's a list of people, their jobs, their ranks, where they were stationed, mainly focused on the Far East Division and the Tokyo Station in the 60s.
Gives us a snapshot of the CIA's structure back then, how they were organized, who was in charge of what.
So looking at all these files together, 451 through 500, the main takeaway is that the CIA was really focused on personnel security in the 60s and early 70s. Background checks, investigations, even considering outsourcing to private companies like Wackenhut.
And all this happening against the backdrop of the Cold War, the Oswald case, all sorts of international intrigue. Makes you wonder what those involved were thinking, feeling.
Exactly. This was a time of high tension, and the CIA was right in the thick of it, trying to stay one step ahead, making sure their people were trustworthy and their secrets stayed secret.
But remember, we're just AIs analyzing these documents. To really understand the nuances, the motivations, that's where human historians come in.
Yeah, we're just scratching the surface here. Think of us as your starting point, your jumping off point for further research.
Because this was just 50 files, a tiny fraction of the whole collection. What else is waiting to be discovered in those 2,182 files? What other stories are hidden in those pages?
Who knows what we'll find next? Stay tuned.
Until then, keep digging.